Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are plunging into an extraordinary stack of sources detailing, well, one of the most compelling and tragic stories of ancient politics. We're talking about a period of breathtaking engineering, this profound existential dread, and the sheer cost of being, well, too successful.
Our mission today is to treat these accounts as direct historical reports. We're looking at a high-stakes political drama from the ancient world where, human ambition just collided violently with divine fate.
Right.
We are watching the story of Polycrates, the despot of Samos, a man whose unbroken run of good luck became his single greatest vulnerability.
And that's what's so fascinating. It ultimately pulled him into this violent web of generational vengeance and, as the reports really seem to suggest, cosmic jealousy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this man first. Polycrates. He wasn't born into dominion, right? He was self-made, a ruthless ruler of Samos. And the story of his ascent, it really tells you everything you need to know about his character. The sources detail how he began with a revolt, and initially he was sharing power with his two brothers, Pantagnotus and Silicon.
But that arrangement was, well, this is never going to last.
No.
It was a transition measured in weeks, not years. Polycrates had a singular vision for total control. He dealt with the shared rule question just brutally. He murdered Pantagnotus.
Just like that.
And then immediately banished Silicon. He was consolidating Samos under his absolute unquestioned dominion. This wasn't consensus building. This was a pure violent seizure of power.
And he didn't just seize power, he built a regional military machine to back it up. We're talking about serious capability for a single island state.
Oh yeah, a formidable fleet of 150 oared ships, triremes, and 1,000 archers.
1,000 archers.
This makes Samos not just powerful, but a genuine threat to every single city along the coastline.
And what's truly unsettling is the philosophy that guided this force. The sources note that Polycrates harried all men alike, making no difference. His reading wasn't confined to enemies.
No, he targeted everyone, friends and foes. And then he offered this bizarre, chilling justification for what was essentially calculated terror.
Right. This is where his mind truly stands out. He argued that if he stole something from a friendly state and then just gave it back, the friend would feel more gratitude than if he had never stolen it in the first place.
It's the ultimate psychological manipulation. He wasn't really stealing for profit. He was stealing to create political debt.
Wow.
He established his dominance first by proving he could take anything he wanted, and then he demonstrated his mercy by choosing to return it. It ensured that any peace granted by Samos was always perceived as, a gift from a superior, unchallengeable power.
So is that calculated terror or just supreme, unvarnished confidence?
I mean, it has to be both, right?
Yeah, I think it's both. It's calculated terror rooted in supreme confidence. And the strategy worked, at least initially. He conquered islands and mainland cities without fail. He defeated the lesbians in a notable sea fight, and the captives were then forced to build a physical monument to his success. They had to dig this massive defensive fosse, a great ditch around the citadel of Samos.
And that physical labor, performed by vanquished enemies, was a constant reminder of his uninterrupted run of success.
It's a powerful visual detail. Polycrates wasn't just winning battles, he was inscribing his victories onto the very landscape of Samos.
And that is exactly what starts attracting dangerous attention.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that unbroken streak of success starts bothering, well, the cosmological order. We move now into the moment when wealth and power cross a truly dangerous threshold.
We're analyzing a moment of profound cosmic unease. And the observer is King Amasis of Egypt, a major player who was keenly watching the shifting power dynamics in the Aegean. He and Polycrates, they had an alliance. It was built on mutual respect, shared gifts. But Amasis's perspective was informed by this deep ancient philosophy concerning fate.
So Amasis's reaction isn't jealousy over the spoils.
No.
It's genuine existential dread for his friend. The sources have this astonishing letter where Amasis expresses profound unease, not happiness, at Polycrates' perfect well-being.
And it's because Amasis understands the jealousy of the gods.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a foundational concept in their worldview. Amasis believes the divine forces demand balance, and if any mortal achieves too much success for too long, they inevitably attract celestial attention, and usually that attention is vengeful.
So you can be too lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Amasis openly states his preference for a life that is checkered with both prosperity and mishap, a mingling of good and bad times. He argues, based on everything he's seen, that relentless, unbroken good fortune inevitably leads to utter destruction.
That is a terrifying prophecy from a friend, not an enemy. And the counsel Amasis offers to preempt this destiny is shocking. He tells Polycrates he must proactively, personally inflict harm upon himself.
He essentially instructs him to game fate. Polycrates has to consider what he deems most precious, what he would most grieve to lose, and deliberately cast it away so that it is never again be seen among men.
So the idea is to sacrifice something deeply personal and valuable now.
Right, to satisfy the god's appetite for misery with a controllable, self-inflicted wound, rather than waiting for the cosmos to demand a catastrophe.
It's an ultimate test of conviction. If you're going to pay a price, pay it now, on your own terms, with something you choose. Amasis' fear is so potent, he's advising his friend, a powerful despot, to voluntarily self-mutilate his own fortune.
And Polycrates, surprisingly, he accepts this advice as good. He gets it. He understands the theological premise.
Okay, so now we get to the action, the specific action detailed in the reports, which truly heightens the drama. Polycrates had to choose his most precious object.
And he settled on a seal ring.
This wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was an emerald set in gold, meticulously crafted by one of Samos's own renowned artisans, Theodorus, son of Telecles.
And that name's important. Theodorus was famous. The choice is significant because the ring was unique and irreplaceable. It wasn't just about money, it was a masterpiece of Samian craftsmanship, a piece of art tied to Polycrates' identity and status.
So throwing it away was like severing himself from a token of the very success he was trying to mitigate.
Exactly. And the sacrifice itself becomes this public theatrical ritual. He takes a 50-oared ship, sails far out to sea, removes the ring, and deliberately casts it away in sight of everyone on the ship.
The whole point was to make it irretrievable, lost forever to the deep.
And the sources explicitly note that when he returns home, he is consumed by grief over the loss. So he paid the emotional price demanded by Amasis.
You have to imagine him feeling this immense, heavy sense of loss. He's performed the ritual, he has felt the necessary sorrow. Maybe for a few days, he feels safe, believing the payment was accepted.
But the cosmos, as Amasis predicted, it refuses to be gamed.
Only 5 or 6 days later, we get the unbelievable, surreal return of the lost treasure.
It's just incredible.
A local fisherman catches an enormous fish, a fine and great fish. Recognizing its quality, the fisherman deems it worthy of the king and offers it as a personal gift to Polycrates.
The irony is excruciating. It's an act of loyalty from a subject returning prosperity to the king. But the moment of discovery is the true cinematic horror of this account. The servants cut off the fish, and there, in its belly, is the emerald seal ring.
Unbelievable.
They bring it back to Polycrates, ecstatic with joy, relating the unbelievable circumstance of its recovery. The lost jewel returned as a gift from the sea, a miracle of good fortune.
And this is the critical juncture. This is where psychology breaks against destiny. Polycrates immediately sees the hand of heaven in this matter. He realizes that even when he actively tries to harm himself and choose his own misfortune, the divine forces intervene to return his prosperity, ensuring his slate of unbroken luck remains terrifyingly clean.
He can't get rid of his good luck.
He can't. So he immediately writes a detailed letter to Amasis, detailing the entire episode.
And Amasis' final verdict is brutal and decisive. When the Egyptian king reads the letter, he understands immediately that no human effort, no psychological trick, no sacrifice, not even self-harm can save Polycrates from his destiny.
So what does he do?
Amasis concludes that because Polycrates found what he actively cast away, he must come to an evil end. Fate has been confirmed.
But let's just pause on Amasis' motivation for a moment. Is he purely acting from this philosophical fear, or is this also, excellent calculated geopolitical maneuvering?
That's a sharp point.
He knows the Persian king Cambyses is raising this massive army against Egypt, and Polycrates, now confirmed as a magnet for divine vengeance, is an immediate liability.
Right. Amasis' next move certainly has political benefits, even if its stated intent is spiritual. He immediately sends a herald to Samos to renounce his friendship. His intent is chillingly clear. When the great catastrophe strikes Polycrates, Amasis does not want to have to grieve his heart for a friend. By severing the ties, he avoids the emotional, spiritual, and potential geopolitical contagion of Polycrates' inevitable doom.
That dramatically severs the last friendly external check on Polycrates. The stage is now set for his downfall, transitioning us from divine jealousy to mortal vengeance.
Indeed. While Polycrates was dealing with his cosmic drama, the external threats were gathering. The Lacedaemonians, that's the Spartans, were preparing for war.
And they'd been invited by Samian exiles, the very men Polycrates had banished in his violent rise to power.
Exactly. So Polycrates, knowing this internal opposition was collaborating with Sparta, decided to use an ongoing international conflict as a highly efficient means of internal political purging.
This is the calculated betrayal, a masterpiece of cold efficiency. Polycrates knew Cambyses, the Persian king, was raising a massive army to invade Egypt. So Polycrates sends a herald to Cambyses asking for troops. But the twist is, he then chose those townsmen he most suspected of rebellion and sent them in 40 triremes to aid Cambyses,
Instructing the Persian leader not to send the men back.
I mean, think about the depth of this cynicism. He is using a massive foreign military operation as a permanent disposal mechanism for his domestic opposition.
These aren't just soldiers. These are his most politically dangerous citizens, removed from Samos without Polycrates having to spill any blood on his own soil.
Yeah.
This move highlights his utter ruthlessness.
It mirrors his earlier philosophy of calculated terror. But the rebels, they refuse to be purged. They don't all march silently into Persian service.
No, and we have conflicting reports about what happened next. Some say they stopped early at Carpathos and just refused to sail on to Egypt.
Okay.
Others say they did reach Egypt, but managed to escape the guard that Cambyses set over them.
In either case, they sail back to Samos, determined to take back their city.
And they actually win the first round. The returning Samians battled Polycrates' ships and won the sea fight. They landed on the island, momentarily victorious. But Polycrates' professional forces, his hired soldiers and archers, were just too strong, too well trained. The rebels were defeated in a land battle and were forced to flee again, seeking refuge with the Lacedaemonians in Sparta.
And while the Spartan-backed exiles prepared their counterattack, Polycrates demonstrated his absolute terrifying control over the remaining population. He used this cruel hostage strategy.
Yeah, he locked up the wives and children of the townsmen who were still subject to him. He put them inside the arsenal and then threatened to burn them all, along with the building, if the men deserted to the returned Samians.
I mean, this move shows you what pure, unadorned despotism looks like. He didn't need to argue with these men or try to gain their loyalty.
No, he just needed to make the price of disloyalty unimaginably high. He ensured the city would stand by securing the ultimate leverage to their families.
So, with the population locked down by fear, the Lacedaemonians arrive and lay siege. The siege was intense, but ultimately unsuccessful. The Spartans managed briefly to fight their way into the outer tower by the seaside, but Polycrates personally led a great force and drove them out.
And the siege reports, they highlight these specific individual acts of valor that really make the narrative come to life. The sources emphasize that Samos would have fallen if all the Lacedaemonians had fought as bravely as two men, Archaeus and Lycopus.
And what did they do?
These two alone, in the chaos of battle, entered the fortress, along with the fleeing crowd of Samians, were cut off and were killed inside the city walls.
And there's a fascinating, unexpected detail here that bridges the personal and the political.
Right. The person reporting this event later mentions meeting a grandson of that Archaeus, named Archaeus, son of Samius, who still honored the Samians above all other guest friends.
Why?
The reason: the Samians gave his grandfather a public funeral, acknowledging the warrior's bravery even though he died fighting for the enemy.
Wow. That small detail speaks volumes about the honor codes that could survive even the bitterest siege.
It does. But ultimately, honor wasn't enough to take Samos. After 40 days, the siege failed, and the Lacedaemonians simply returned to the Peloponnesus.
And the story that Polycrates bribed them away with guilt-leaden coins.
That's explicitly and, rather humorously dismissed in the sources as a foolish tale.
This failure sets a historical precedent, though. This unsuccessful siege was the first expedition to Asia made by Dorians of Lacedaemon. It's a huge moment, even though they failed.
A huge moment.
But before we follow the exiles further, we need to understand why Sparta, and especially Corinth, sailed all that way. It wasn't just for the Samians they had taken in. The reasons are deep, complex, and generational.
The grudges run back decades.
Yeah.
Let's start with that famous, almost theatrical exchange between the desperate Samian exiles and the Spartan rulers.
Okay, so the Samians come before the Spartan rulers. They give this long, flowery speech detailing their dire need and how much they required military aid. And the Spartan leaders first reply. They said they had forgotten the beginning of the speech and could not understand its end.
Spartan bluntness at its finest. They basically said, "Be concise, you wasted our time."
So the exiles returned a second time, having learned their lesson. They bring a sack with them and say only, "The sack wants meal."
And to this, the Spartans replied, "Your sack was needless," suggesting they could have been even briefer. But they agreed to help. They were compelled by necessity and, probably more importantly, by old scores.
The Lacedaemonian grievances themselves are split in the accounts. The Samians claim the expedition was just repayment for help they had provided to Sparta against Messenia.
A crucial conflict for the Spartans. But the Spartans tell a different story entirely. They claim it was pure revenge for thefts perpetrated by the Samians years before.
Specifically, two incredibly valuable objects. First, a golden bowl they were carrying to Croesus, and second, a remarkable linen breastplate sent to them by Amasis, the Egyptian king.
The same Amasis who just renounced Polycrates.
Exactly. And let's talk about that stolen breastplate for a moment, because the description is astonishing. It wasn't just gold and cotton, it was linen, decorated with gold and cotton embroidery, inwoven with many figures.
And the real wonder of it, the source emphasizes, was the sheer delicacy of the thread. 360 distinct threads, all plainly visible, composing each larger thread.
That is not just luxury. That is ancient high technology and masterful artistry. To have 360 separate filaments visible to the naked eye woven into a single thread, that required extraordinary skill.
It was the exact counterpart of one Amasis dedicated at Athene in Lindus. Its theft was a massive national and political insult, providing a deep-seated justification for revenge years later.
But even this pales in comparison to the intense generational hatred held by the Corinthians against Samos.
Right, which stemmed from a Samian interference regarding a plot by the despot Periander, a plot that took place a full generation before the siege of Polycrates.
So to understand why Corinth was so eager to lay siege to Samos, we need to rewind a full generation and dive into one of the most agonizing family tragedies in ancient history.
It all starts with the original sin committed by Periander, the despot of Corinth, who had killed his wife, Melissa. This one act set off a domino effect of domestic strife that became a geopolitical disaster.
And Periander was also seeking vengeance on the people of Corcyra, an island subject to him, because they had started a quarrel by committing some terrible crime against him.
A terrible crime. So Periander chose 300 boys, the sons of notable Corcyraean men, and sent them to Sardis to be made eunuchs for Alyattes.
A horrifying, calculated act of revenge on the next generation.
Exactly. And the Corinthian guards, bringing these boys, they put in at Samos. And when the Samians heard the true, terrible purpose for which these boys were being transported, they acted immediately and with great moral clarity. First, they told the boys to take sanctuary in the temple of Artemis.
So when the Corinthian guards tried to starve the boys out of the temple, the Samians orchestrated an ongoing festival around the sanctuary. This is the critical intervention that established the feud.
The Samians created a new custom for their festival. Mighty dances of youths and maidens were ordained, and cakes of sesame and honey were brought. And the Corcyraean boys, who were starving, were able to snatch these cakes and so be fed. This went on until the Corinthian guards were defeated by the sustained Samian ingenuity and they gave up and departed.
So the Samians returned the 300 boys safely to Corcyra.
A noble act of humanitarian intervention preventing a great atrocity. But it saved the Corcyraeans from Periander's wrath and forever established the enmity between Corinth and Samos. Samos had interfered with the despot's vengeance.
But we need to zoom in on the root of Periander's initial anger, the domestic tragedy that turned him into such a monster, which is the agonizing story of his son, Lycophron.
After killing Melissa, Periander suffered this immense domestic calamity. He had two sons by her, ages 17 and 18, and Melissa's father, Procles, the despot of Epidaurus, invited his two grandsons to visit.
Okay.
As they left, Procles planted the psychological seed of conflict with a single, devastating question to the boys. Know you, boys, him who slew your mother?
The sources tell us the elder son paid no heed. Maybe he was less attentive or just less sensitive to the implication, but the younger, Lycophron.
Lycophron was struck with such horror that when he returned home to Corinth, he refused to speak a single word to his father, the mother's murderer. He wouldn't answer him, nor make any reply to his questions.
This is a profound moral conviction, a total, absolute stand against his father's crime. Imagine the tension in the palace. A prince unilaterally declaring such isolation against an absolute despot.
Lycophron's silence was a weapon, an impossible commitment to principle that spoke volumes.
Periander eventually learned the cause from the elder, less thoughtful son and flew into a rage, banishing Lycophron. But he didn't stop there. He pursued the boy mercilessly, sending messages to everyone Lycophron stayed with, threatening and persecuting anyone who dared to house or even address him.
The harassment escalated until Periander made a formal, severe proclamation. Anyone who received Lycophron or even spoke to him would be liable to pay a massive fine consecrated to Apollo.
It was a decree designed to isolate him completely, spiritually and politically, leveraging divine fear to enforce the banishment.
And the boy, honoring the divine threat of the fine, became a starving, unwashed vagrant sleeping in public porches.
We have to pause on that. For 3 days, a prince starved in public, refusing comfort to uphold a rule his own tyrant father made. That's an almost impossible commitment of principle over comfort and survival.
After 3 days, Periander sees his son's pitiful state and finally takes pity. His anger abates slightly, and he attempts a reconciliation, appealing to every logical, pragmatic argument he can muster against his son's impossible idealism.
He appeals first to ambition. Why choose this life over inheriting the sovereignty of wealthy Corinth? Then he appeals to shared tragedy, admitting, "'Tis on me that it has come, and 'tis I that bear the greater share of it, inasmuch as the act was mine." He tries to rationalize the murder as an evil chance.
And finally, he appeals to raw pragmatism, which is the language of a tyrant. Bethink you how much better a thing it is to be envied than to be pitied.
Yeah.
Be a ruler, not a vagrant.
But Lycophron's moral stand is absolutely unbreakable. His response cuts Periander to the quick, showing that the boy has internalized the rule better than the ruler.
What does he say?
He says, "You have made yourself liable to the fine consecrated to the god by speaking to me."
Wow.
He refuses the pardon and forces his father to admit he broke his own divine proclamation just by talking to him.
So Periander recognized the trouble was past cure or constraint. He sent Lycophron away to Corcyra, which was subject to him, to get him out of sight. But immediately he took vengeance on Procles, Melissa's father, deeming him the chief cause of his troubles, capturing Procles himself and Epidaurus.
The cycle of familial murder and revenge just keeps spilling outward politically.
And as time went on, Periander grew old and frail, realizing he couldn't direct all his affairs. He saw his elder son as slow-witted and sent for Lycophron to rule, wanting him to be despot.
And Lycophron, true to his character, refused even to answer the messenger. The moral isolation remained total.
The final desperate plea came from Lycophron's own sister. She argued he should cease punishing himself, that pride is the possession of fools, and warned him not to let others seize their estate.
And his reply? Still uncompromising, but he offers a single final condition. He would never return to Corinth while his father was alive.
And here's the great, awful twist of fate that sealed the Corinthian grudge. Periander, desperate to secure the succession, offers to leave Corinth and go to Corcyra himself so Lycophron could rule. The son consents.
But when the Corcyraeans learn of this plan, that the old, ruthless despot Periander is coming to rule them, they preemptively kill Lycophron to prevent the tyrant from moving countries.
They murdered the heir to avoid the tyrant, and this murder is the terrible event that fueled Periander's desire for vengeance upon Corcyra, which led to his plot to send the 300 boys to Sardis.
Which Samos, through an act of kindness, foiled.
Right. Samos, in protecting the innocent, became the recipient of Corinth's multi-generational, blood-soaked hatred. That hatred, fueled by the tragedy of Lycophron, is what made Corinth so zealous to join the siege against Polycrates.
So we return to the Samian exiles who fled after that failed siege. They are now desperately in need of money to continue their campaign against Polycrates. They sail to the island of Siphnus, which was, at this time, immensely wealthy due to its gold and silver mines.
Siphnus's wealth was legendary. Their prosperity was such that their treasury at Delphi, one of the richest treasuries in the entire Greek world, was built from only a tenth of their revenues. They were living in unparalleled luxury.
They had previously asked the oracle if their great prosperity would last, and the prophecy they received is one of those classic conditional warnings. They were told to beware the day their Prytaneum, their town hall, and their marketplace were white-browed,
meaning adorned with expensive white Pyrian marble. And they were also warned to watch for an ambush of wood in a herald red.
The Sipnian people, blinded by their luxury, they failed to fully understand the prophecy, even as they began adorning their public buildings with white marble.
And then the Samians arrived and sent messengers demanding a 10-talent loan.
And the doom was subtle and immediate. The Samian ship constituted the wooden ambush, and since in ancient times ships were commonly painted with vermilion or red paint,
The ship itself was the herald red.
Exactly. When the Sifnians refused the loan, the Samians ravaged their lands. The Sifnians rushed out to battle, were defeated, and forced to pay 100 talents, 10 times the original demand.
And this event marks the definitive end of the great prosperity of Siphnus.
The Samians, now flush with cash, continue their desperate journey, forever pursued by fate but fueled by revenge. They took the island of Hydrea from the men of Hermione, then sailed to Cydonia in Crete.
Though the reports note their original intent was to expel the Zacynthians, they experienced 5 years of relative prosperity in Crete, establishing themselves and building new temples and shrines there. But their luck, like Polycrates, ran out.
Right. In the 6th year, they were finally defeated and enslaved by a combined force of Aeginese and Cretans.
The final symbolic act of this entire Samian exile saga was the defilement of their ships. Their ships' prows, which were distinctively shaped like boars' heads, were cut off and dedicated at the Temple of Athene in Aegina.
And this was the Aegineans' final act of revenge, stemming from an old feud started by a King Amasis of Samos many generations before.
You see how these grudges just pile up? Polycrates' own actions, plus the ancient debts of Samos, creating this inescapable web of violence and retribution. The long arc of vengeance is finally satisfied, and the exiles are gone.
We have traced Polycrates' rise through ruthlessness, the cosmic forces that predicted his fall, the political machinations that executed his enemies, and the long chain of revenge that brought about the doom of the Samian exiles. But the story of Samos itself does not end with its despot or its rebels.
No, and we must conclude by shifting focus entirely from the ephemeral nature of political power to the incredible, enduring physical legacy of the island. The narrator wrote at such length about the Samians not just for the political drama, but because Samos was the maker of the 3 greatest works to be seen in any Greek land.
Accomplishments that dwarf the fleeting existence of any tyrant, even Polycrates.
Exactly.
Work number 1, the tunnel or channel. This is an engineering feat of breathtaking audacity that we just have to appreciate. It was a massive, double-mouthed channel pierced straight through the base of a high hill to secure the city's water supply.
The dimensions are astounding for the time. The whole channel was 7 furlongs long, that's nearly a mile, and it ran 150 fathoms, about 900 feet, straight through the solid rock base of the hill.
And it was 8 feet high and 8 feet wide. Just big enough for a man to walk through.
But the true marvel is how they did it and what it concealed. They were clearly digging from both sides of the hill simultaneously and meeting in the middle, a monumental feat of surveying and mathematics for the 6th century BC.
It was designed by Eupolinus, son of Nostraphus, a Megarian.
And the inner marvel. Running along the whole length of that tunnel was a secondary channel, 20 cubits deep and 3 feet wide, that's about 30 feet deep, carrying the spring water via pipes directly into the city of Samos.
Buried deep within the main tunnel.
Exactly. This wasn't just infrastructure. This was an ingeniously secure, protected water supply, immune to siege and contamination. This reveals an immense investment in the long-term future and security of the city, regardless of who ruled it.
Okay, work number 2 is the mole in the sea. This is the massive structure enclosing the harbor, creating a safe, protected port.
We're talking about a significant barrier, sunk a full 20 fathoms deep, that's 120 feet, and it extended for more than 2 furlongs in length. To construct a barrier of this size and depth in the open water required colossal resources, organizational skill, and technical knowledge.
This is Roman-level engineering hundreds of years early.
Yeah, it really is. And finally, work number 3, the temple. It's described as the greatest temple the reporter had ever seen, initially built by Rocus, son of Philes, himself a Samian.
So these 3 works, the tunnel, the mole, and the temple, are the reason why Samos is remembered in such detail. Not for the despot, but for the builders.
And that's the whole cycle. We have watched the self-made man Polycrates rising through ruthlessness, terrifying his allies with his unbroken prosperity, try to trick fate with his seal ring sacrifice, and ultimately facing ruin.
And we saw the immovable moral principle of Lycophron, which led to his murder and a geopolitical feud. Both massive ambition in Polycrates and pure principle in Lycophron ultimately resulted in destruction.
So what endures then? Not the despots, not the kings, or the specific political alliances that flared up and died out. What remains standing are the structures.
The incredible works of engineering, the mole sunk 120 feet deep, the tunnel piercing the hill for a mile, and the complex, messy details of human vengeance that spanned generations and defined entire cultures.
The political power of Polycrates was temporary, dictated by the jealous glance of the gods and the plotting of men. But the ingenuity of Eupolinus, the mole builders, and the temple architect Rhoecus provided a physical, lasting legacy to Samos that decided the short lifespans of their rulers and the chaos of war.
Our final provocative thought for you to carry away from this deep dive is this. Consider the profound contrast between the three great, enduring physical works of Samos and the temporary, violent nature of Polycrates' political power. The builders sought to bring water and security to Samos for all time. The ruler sought power for his lifetime. In the end, does history truly reward the builders over the rulers?